another round of Reclaiming Timeless Ways is coming your way. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, glad to have you with us. And Mike, as always, you kind of set the tone with the topic, and then off we go.
Okay, the topic for this one is isolation.
Okay?
Okay.
Isolation. Tell me where your brain's at.
Human isolation.
Okay.
So we're not isolating a bad circuit in a radio. We're talking about
Gotcha.
people that are too much by themselves,
Yeah.
to the extent where they feel like their life is shriveling up.
Sure.
So it happens for a lot of reasons. Somebody's traumatized, so their ability to trust is damaged.
Sure.
Right. Soldiers become isolated after they
Right.
see their friend's head blown off,
Right.
or somebody burned to death, or lose a limb, something like that. And there's a description of what PTSD is. It's very brilliant, and that is PTSD is a sane reaction to an insane event.
Yeah.
Right? That's succinct,
Yeah.
but it's really important. It's like, oh, so if you're talking to somebody and they're like knee deep in shit 24/7 because they went through a train wreck or a car wreck or a fire or a crime, or a bad medical experience, it's like you're having a sane reaction to an insane event.
Right.
Now, can you teach them to identify that they're reacting automatically so that they're at least conscious? Oh, okay, something triggers me to feel endangered, right? Can I take a quiet breath, look at my body, and say, where am I manifesting this stress like a trapped animal? Where am I going like this, right?
Right.
So is it up in this big triangular muscle just below your neck, between your neck and your shoulders, the traps? We hide where we house our stress there. Or am I tightening up my gut so I'm not hardly breathing? Or are my eyes fixed like you're in a corner and there's a mountain lion coming to eat you, right? And you're like this, right? You're freezing, right? So there's all these in panic, right? So if somebody is panicked or overloaded, either initially or chronically, they're going to have some. So if you teach somebody to ask them, well, are you having a survival reaction?
Sure.
And are you actually as threatened now as you were when you learned that reaction? Or are you repeating the reaction, but the threat's not there to that extent? And if that's the case, do you want to continue to have that reaction? How is it affecting your life? If you breathe in and let your gut relax, right? Or if you consciously unfreeze your eyes, look around, or reduce the grip. Like if you've got a death grip on your steering wheel because you were traumatized in a wreck. So you got hit head on by a truck and you're like this, right? So what happens if you reduce that by 30%? Take a deep breath and relax your shoulders a little bit. Maybe you'll be less trapped. And people are very humiliated by this, so they isolate,
Yeah.
right? So those are simple things in the sense that you can learn them in a few minutes, but they're profound in terms of the effect that they can begin to have. If you practice self-awareness and then you practice doing that, say, oh, okay, yeah, that's right, I'm having a shitty reaction because something triggered me and it reminded me of a terrible event, but I'm overreacting.
Yeah.
Right? So if a person is chronically overreacting, they're embarrassed, they're humiliated, they're going to become less social.
Sure.
And then they'll be isolated, right? So age, people, maybe somebody is very hooked in with their spouse. Now in this community, people are hyper family focused. They live in family bubbles, right? And that's not a bad thing for the most part. But it is a bad thing because if something changes, if you have a death in your family, And now all of a sudden you're alone, right?
Right.
What do? Are you done? Are you done? Is your script finished? Do you just recede and wait to die? Or do you say, that's something I can't control, but what can I control?
Sure.
What can I do? Can I spend 10 minutes a day instead of 0 saying hello to people,
Sure.
right? Something instead of nothing. Resources. I remember I had a client once who had been, he was a mathematician and he worked in the fishing industry.
Okay.
He was in his he was a mathematician and a physicist. So he did some analysis in the fishing industry and he lost his job. He was close to 60 and that rendered him unemployable.
Okay.
So his resources went to shit,
Yeah.
right? So he was like desperate, hopeless. We talked about that a little. I couldn't help him find work, culture. What's the culture like? Well, that hooks back into the family,
Sure.
right? Or just if the culture is very closed in one way or another, inclusive and exclusive, sometimes it's hard to break into the circle.
Right.
Maybe you're going to the wrong church
Yeah.
because the people in that church are special.
Right.
Thanks for visiting. F off. Don't come back. Bye. Right? It happens.
Yeah, absolutely it does.
It does. You don't have a white enough shirt on.
And the interesting thing about that, and you hear that more often than I'd like to admit in the world. We are. It's evident in teachings that humans are made for relationship.
Absolutely.
And so when you talk about isolation, I think one of the essential pieces of living is relationship.
Absolutely.
And so when isolation sets in on one of these many, and I know you've got more scenarios, that in a sense does start your downward spiral. It really does if you do isolate.
Right.
Pull out of it.
So, yeah.
How can we pull you out of it? I mean, you're given some nice examples, some solutions, some steps. If you find yourself, because it's incredibly unhealthy in my opinion to maintain a life of isolation.
It is. It is. Let's say you think that people are assholes. Well, are all people assholes or just a bunch? So do you go looking for the assholes as evidence to rationalize having 0 contact? Because if you do that, you're going to be right.
Yeah. If you're seeking something, you will find it.
You will. Exactly. Right. Your tires aren't perfect. Yeah, they've only got 90% tread. Yeah, see, I told you.
Yeah.
That's no good.
Seek and you shall find, not in the way that line was meant.
So if 90% of people are assholes, let's say, just for argument's sake.
Which one of us is it, Mike, or is it both of us?
Oh, it's definitely me. But do we look for the 90 or for the 10?
Right, right,
What evidence am I seeking,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So I have a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
I'm going to be right.
right,
It's very expensive.
right.
It's very expensive, Or if you're in a helping profession and people have burned you out, maybe you should identify what a narcissist looks like and go find different kind of people to interact with, people who give as well as receive,
Right.
What's your communication style? I wrote down 3 sets of numbers. Is it 90-10? Is it 50-50 approximately? Or is it 10-90? Right? How do you find your balance? Maybe if you're too much of a giver, you get exhausted.
Sure.
Maybe it's natural for you to give. So maybe you're 70-30, but not 90-10.
Right.
90-10, you will be exhausted, and then you will just instinctively withdraw.
Yeah.
So that's that thing. It's like, what am I reacting to? Is this reminding me of a car wreck or a fire? You know, a fire engine goes by and bam, it triggers somebody because they had a horrendous event, right? Think of all the people in some kind of a disaster. 9/11 comes to mind.
Right.
How many of those people are still triggered
Oh, I'm sure.
22 years later?
I'm sure.
Yeah, right. So, how are we using our resources to make our lives better or worse? So the internet, right? Is the internet giving you fake relationships
Yeah.
where there's no real depth of sincerity? Or are you honestly, somebody has no legs and they don't have somebody to bring them outside or something like that? That's a hell of a lot better than nothing. So it could be a positive or a negative.
I was just going to say the same. It allows you to network with other individuals that, if you seek it, again, it's what you seek. But
Right.
it could give you a network of individuals that could support you and maybe having a like affliction. But it can also be an empty hole of
Right.
nothing.
Yeah, it could be a lot of pretend.
Yeah.
Right, pretend sincerity. You know, phone, same thing. You know, if you have no social contact and you decide, I'm going to make one phone call a week, how differently will you experience your life? A personal phone call. Let's say I decide I'm going to have one phone call a week for 10 or 15 minutes instead of 0. I would think that my qualitative experience of life would be improved
Sure.
to some marked degree. You know, it's a very subtle amount, but it's not nothing. Letters. I don't hardly ever write letters.
Right.
Right? We're just out of, my handwriting is atrocious, you know? So that makes it more difficult for me. I practiced writing letter, you know, A, B, B, B,
Right.
probably 100 or more pages as a kid. Didn't help, you know? So, now, on the other side, somewhere in my closet, I have a typewriter.
Yeah, I was going to say with computers and some of that, you can
Right.
type up still a meaningful thought from you,
Yeah.
just not more neatly written, right?
Yeah, right. I think I can understand what this guy wrote. Pain, physical pain can be very distracting,
Yeah.
right? So if you know somebody who's physically in pain or somebody that's depressed, that can be pain. It can be exhausting. The last part can radically affect the way you live. And that is, if you live by yourself, you can say, I am alone. It's true. What does it imply?
Right.
What do you infer from that, right?
Versus you live by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's saying the same thing with very different meanings.
Oh, boy. Right. Right. It's like, am I hitting the baseball with the bat or my own head,
Yeah.
basically? So one, I'm alone, right? The other is, I'm in my own company.
Right.
We can have a conversation. How many of you are there? Oh, less than 10, you know? But that's huge. And so if your back hurts or your knee or your hip or your neck, does that mean you're less mobile or immobile?
Right. We've all heard the whole glass half full, half empty.
Yeah,
That's exactly what you're saying here. How do you look at
right.
that situation, whatever it might be?
Go to a junk store, I've done this, and bought a $1 massager and worked on my knee for 30 seconds and made it 30 or 40% better for the next 3 or 4 days
Yeah.
from 30 seconds. Instead of, my knee feels like shit, I'm not getting up,
Yeah.
right?
The one thing I always pull away from your shows, Mike, and it seems to be a theme in several of them. One thing, if I were to pull out, you know, maybe you are isolated watching this, or you feel that way, or have had an event.
Right.
And we appreciate you watching us. But you always say, not always, I'm never, not supposed to say always, right? Never and always. You oftentimes say,
You should never say always.
right, something is better than nothing. And
Absolutely.
I always pull that theme away from you, like you were mentioning a second ago, the phone call or whatever it might be, whatever your situation, and it could be something that Mike did mention. There's a lot of scenarios that could have you in a position where you feel isolated or are isolated, but we do have control and we have the power to do something about it. And that would hopefully serve as an encouragement, not a condemnation, an encouragement to do something versus nothing, Mike.
Absolutely. There was a comment that I heard somebody make once. He was kind of reflecting on the work of Bandler and Grindler, two psychologists from the 50s.
Okay. Bandler and
If
Grindler.
I remember right, yes.
That's a pair of names.
Yeah. It sounds like a pair of comedians.
Right, it kind of
Or
does.
two parrots. So, anyway, they created this form of psychology, which is basically how we speak to ourselves.
Sure.
And he said, what happens to you is important, or they said, but how you define it is critical.
Right.
So,
Very true.
yeah. So you get your leg all mangled up in a wreck or skiing accident. Are you finished or are you challenged?
Right. You decide.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Well, we appreciate you taking us on another journey. We appreciate you joining us and wish you a fantastic day from the crew at Reclaiming Timeless Ways.
Thank you.